Boom! And just like that, we're live. So, a warm welcome to wherever you are and wherever you're listening this, whether you are on the Facebooks or the YouTubes, the Gettrs, the BrandNewTubes, the Rumbles, the Odysseys, whatever. I think I ran out of them. Thanks very much for being here with me this Monday evening. And what a lovely Monday evening it is. A good evening to buy me a coffee and support the platform. Link below. I'll have an extra sugar in mine. If you don't want to use that, you can go to Donor Box. You can drop $1 or a pound or a Bitcoin, which is worth approximately a penny at the moment in the Donor Box, whatever you want. And that's what helps support the platform. Also, don't forget, on top of these live streams, there's the daily podcasts, half a dozen daily podcasts every day, the most frequent daily podcast in the UK or anywhere as far as I know. And thank you. We're about to hit a big milestone there. A big milestone is about to be hit on the podcast channel. Now, before we get to our special guest, I just need to do my usual thing. And that is what I have to do is I have to bring up another one of the streams so I can see all the stuff you guys are saying, just to make sure that it's all good. I wouldn't want. So let me just, he says, make sure I can I'm bringing up the Gettrs. So if you're watching this over on the Getterverse, boom, I can now see you. Hello, John Hillhouse over in Gettrs. Oh, I see all the names coming. Gorgon, Malabites. Yes, too many people to say hello to, really, but I'll do my best. Hi, Jason, Leslie, Summertime Sue, Billy Piper, John Gleason, John's all the way from Luton, Tommy Robinson country, indeed. Chris Davies, my good friend, and Harry, yeah, all you guys. And of course, Leslie Butler, who's very fast off the mark. Leslie was the second person to join the stream. Her alacrity is something to behold. So listen, guys, hope everybody's well. Hope this finds you good. Don't forget there's super chats here on the YouTube, if you're on the YouTubes, there's super chats you can send. Get your comment read out. Now, lots of things that we will be tackling. For example, I'm sure everyone's seen Joe Biden fall off his bike. That was a laugh, wasn't it? That amused me enormously. A great analogy for how he's running the United States. And oh yes, Malibites, thanks for all you guys over at Voice of Wales. You do a great job. And Mimi, all the way from Missouri. So as always, we have an international audience. And thing about an international audience is the topics that we try to cover, whilst they may relate to one particular country, I think they relate to many, many countries. And so I'm really pleased to bring back someone who we had with us a while back. Unfortunately, the issues that he covers have not gone away, to borrow a phrase. And so we're going to talk about basically this tsunami of illegal cross-channel migration. So without further ado, he's been sitting in the background here. Let's bring him on the screen. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Steve Laws.
Hello, mate. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, Steve. I'm good. It's sunny outside. I've got a t-shirt on. I'm chilled. I've got an orange juice in front of me. Things are looking good. So I am very well, thank you. And oh, by the way, hello to our Hawaiian regular Donny girl. Aloha, y'all. Good to see you on the stream as well. As you see, Steve, we have them from everywhere, basically. Nobody from Rwanda yet. I'm still waiting.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, not yet. Yeah, soon. I think we'll probably get quite a few of them, whether we want them or not. So, so it's an international audience that we're chatting to this night. But Steve, I mean, already I see people commenting on your work. And Steve, I mean, I have to say, to start the show, I follow you on Telegram mostly. That's where I see a lot of your stuff. And I have to say, I mean, there are a few people working in what I would call journalism in the UK who are worthy and worth listening to. One of them is Tommy Robinson, who I think does a good job exposing, the grooming gangs and all that kind of stuff and that whole big topic, which Tommy is very bravely gets himself into. And then there's yourself, because you are doing a fantastic job, I believe, in highlighting to the people of the United Kingdom the stuff that's happening on our southern beaches. And if you're someone like me, Steve, we don't live there, so we read about it, but it seems a bit of a distance away, and it's hard to understand all the stuff that's going on. The mainstream media won't touch it, of course, because they're a bunch of cards. You do. So first of all, a big congratulations to yourself, Steve, for actually, getting down there and documenting this stuff. I mean, you've been doing this for a while now, haven't you?
Yeah. Cheers, mate. I appreciate that. It's kind words. But yeah, I've been doing it roughly 2.5, coming up to 3 years nearly. And all that I've seen since it started is just grown out of control. It was a small scale operation. Obviously, it was still quite a large problem when I started, but it was relatively small scale compared to what it is now. It's completely out of control. And like you say, the media, whilst they do come down and cover it, they're only focusing on the odd child or the odd family that come over. And then they make a big song and dance about one family coming over and completely forget about the 400 young blokes behind them.
I know. The mainstream media can only take photographs that have got children and young mothers in them, and it's really, that's why the work you do, Steve. I mean, it has to be put on record here. It's important to say these things. It's actually crucial, because if you weren't doing stuff like this, I know there's other people doing it as well, but I think you're foremost. Frankly, we wouldn't have a clue what's going on, because the mainstream media don't want to touch this topic. They don't want to touch on the details that you show. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, all you're really doing is, it is literally documentary. You are showing the stuff that goes on, which I thought the media should be doing, but we know they're a bunch of frauds and they don't do that. So it's a spectacular operation that you managed to do. You must be sick of looking at dinghies by this point.
Oh, honestly, mate, I'm absolutely fed up to the eyeballs with it. But you have, like you say, you have to do it, because in the ideal world, I wouldn't have to go down to the docks every day and cover what's going on. I wouldn't have to film all this, because the press would be doing their job. But the reality is they're never going to do that. So the likes of myself and others, we have to go down there and highlight what happens. And the reality is that the problem is huge. And it's like a worldwide problem. Obviously, we focus on the Channel crossings, but it's the same in America, it's the same in France, it's the same in Spain, Italy, and you could go on and list off 100 countries and it's exactly the same. It's a worldwide phenomenon that the media completely ignore. Yeah.
And I think, Steve, when you started doing this, back in 2018, like, it was an issue then, but you must have seen, and obviously last year was like, saw record numbers coming, but this year seems to be even worse.
Well, last year it was 28,500 that came over, and the year before that it was 8,500. But this year we're already over 11,500. But what's different this year is the Border Force have already acquired four new vessels that they've already acquired, which are ex-wind farm vessels. They're capable of carrying at least 100 illegals at the minimum on board at a time. And they're still going to acquire 7 more, because that's part of the budget that was put through last year. So there's still 7 more Border Force vessels to come, as well as the Navy out in the Channel helping them in the middle of the Channel, as well as the RNLI, and the French obviously escorting them over. Whilst all of that used to go on apart from the Navy. But with the Navy being involved, it's more efficient, it's more organised, and everything happens a lot quicker.
But it's mad. This isn't. That's why I wanted to talk to you, because I know the folks are going to be really interested. I mean, I remember saying at one point, well, it'd be good to get the Navy involved. In my fantasy, it's a ring of steel. Nobody gets through. All boats are returned. But that's the opposite, isn't it? Even what you're saying, Border Force is actually escorting these people in. The Navy is facilitating the efficacy of that. So it's going to be a big number for 2022, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the predictions for this year are between 60,000 to 100,000 is what a lot of the people in the know have predicted. Personally, I would sit around the 70,000 figure is what I think will come over by boats. Obviously, it's hard to tell what comes over by lorries and various other routes and overstaying the visas, because it's almost impossible to cover that. But from the Channel point of view, I always warn people of having the Navy in the Channel, because a lot of people used to go, get the Navy out there, stop the boats. they seem to forget the Navy have been in the Mediterranean transporting illegal immigrants over for the last 10, 15 years. The Manchester bomber was picked up by the Royal Navy. This is what people need to understand. So when they was calling for the Navy to come, I'm going, please don't make that, because it's going to make things 10 times worse. And ultimately it has.
It's shocking, you know, and
this is depressing to say, but it's true.
Yeah, well, but this is the thing, and this is where I know a lot of American people watching this as well as British people watching this. Oh, here's an interesting comment, actually. Just can we bring up Kim's comment here? This is one of our regulars, Steve Kim. He says he lives in Kent and it's a nightmare. Sexual abuse of our girls gives Rotherham a run for its money, and Kent police and local authorities are silent.
Absolutely, he's absolutely spot on. Like there was an attempted abduction down by Stade Court Hotel, which is where the illegal immigrants are staying in Hive. Kent police was not interested in the story. The mother actually wrote to me herself so I could make people aware of what was actually going on. And it was three Eastern European looking men that came straight out of the hotel, went down to the park, tried to abduct the child. Luckily, the mother was there and stopped it from happening. Like the article's on my website. And then she followed them back to the hotel, tried reporting it to the police, etc. They were not even interested because if it was because they're foreign individuals, they don't want to open up a whole can of worms. And that's just one incident. I could list off about 100, 200 incidents just off the top of my head. The problem in Kent is staggering out of control. And people can't even the people in Kent don't realise how bad it is.
Yeah, well, I remember the last time we spoke, I remember that was one of the things I pursued with you about what was the understanding of what's happening within these regions. But I mean, it is shocking that Kent, you know, the so-called Garden of England, it seems to be now a major receptacle for these migrants. A couple of questions for you. Where do these fighting age young men, where do they mostly come from? What are the countries of origin, to the best of your knowledge?
Well, I put out something on my Telegram earlier, which the government have released some statistics from just this year's arrivals, I think it is, back to 2018. And the majority are from Iran, Iraq, Syria, Albania, Yemen, Eritrea, and there's a couple of other nations. I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it's majority Middle Eastern, and then you get some from the very far end of Asia. So if they're coming from places like Yemen, etc., and where else was it? It was I can't remember off the top of my head. But they're coming from various nations. It's not just individual. Like the majority do come from Iran, Iraq, and Syria, but they're also coming from various nations from all over the world. It's open season now on who can come to the UK.
Yeah, and of course, I remember, you know, when this all started back in sort of the mid sort of 2015, when Merkel opened up the gates of hell, we were told, oh, don't worry about it. These are all, you know, doctors, nurses, scientists, you know, space engineers. And, I mean, that was a huge lie. And they've been lying ever since about this. You know, we can't have honest conversations about things like this in mainstream media, which is why I love to do this kind of stuff, Steve, because it gives people like you a chance to, you know, at least get some of the stuff that you're putting out. I know so well through your Telegram. But yeah, so these people like are coming from cultures very different to ours, aren't they?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. They're not culturally matched to us whatsoever in the slightest, and they have no intentions of integrating. And that's a great myth that they want to integrate, because they don't. Like they come over, they don't even want to learn the language. In the places that they come from, it's okay to approach a 14, 13-year-old girl and ask them for a date and for sex and stuff, because it's the norm where they come from. But over here, it's completely not acceptable whatsoever. But these people, whether they understand it or not, have no care whatsoever for it. Like, you've seen all the articles that have been put out just by the mainstream media. So you can imagine what goes on behind the scenes that doesn't get reported. It's absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's get stuck into some of the fundamental points. And one of our American friends here raises the point, and it's the obvious one. The interesting issue, he says, with the UK is that you have a natural barrier. I mean, you are an island. You really are a bloody island. And so the fact that this can happen, this is, and he's right, actually, this is strictly and totally political, being driven at different levels, I dare say. But it is kind of embarrassing. I feel, Steve, as a Brit, a nation people, an island people, and our government. They don't want to defend us, do they? They don't want to stop what's coming across the channel.
No, they've got no intention whatsoever. They could stop it overnight. Simple as that. They don't have to listen to the international treaties that they're signed up to. They're not worth more than the paper they're written on. It's the equivalent of making the rule that I'm not going to smoke in my flat, and then you have a fag, and then no one's going to do anything about it because you're the one in charge. So ultimately, that's the equivalent of what's going on. They've got no intention of stopping it. And if they was, the signs would be clear. You'd be seeing it, making up ideas to send people to Rwanda, etc., etc. They're all just pipe dreams. There was never going to work. The civil service that is corrupt to the core, and they're the people that are causing all of this mischief. For instance, all the government, the mainstream media, they're all running with the narrative of it was the ECHR that stops the flight. The ECHR stopped 7. Our own courts and our own laws stopped the rest, which was about 100.
30.
That's what people need to understand. So it's easy to blame the ECHR, but ultimately it was our own government and our own laws that blocked it in the first place.
Can I just interrupt to say, Richie says here, has the color scheme always been blue and yellow, or has David gone woke? Like, Salve Ukraine. No, I haven't gone rogue.
I've only just noticed that.
I know. Gonna have to have words with our producer. How do we get the Russian colors in? I'm not sure about that. But anyway, but the thing is that you made a great point there. And folks, we do need to focus on this. Last week, the media were gaslighting us, saying the ECHR was to blame. It was the evil Europeans because they stopped that plane load of illegal migrants going off to Rwanda. But you're right, Steve. They stopped 7 of them. The British system stopped about 120, whatever.
I think it's 123. I think it was exactly
123. Yeah. So this is the crucial point. It's wrong in a way to gaslight the ECHR. It's Britain. It's the British system, the British court, Steve, and the British political system that is so corrupted that they are allowing this, and they're just playing games in the media. And it's only because you expose the stuff that's going on that anyone even gets to know half of this, I suspect.
Well, yeah, this is the thing. That's why I continue to do it, because whenever I have a break and then I sort of rely on the media to see if they're going to do their job properly, after about 3 days of not going to the docks, I'm like, oh my God, I've got to go back. They're not even showing the slightest thing what happens. It took them a month after the new facility was built in Dover, which cost £2 million. It took them a month to report on that issue. And that was only because we'd banged the drum so much that this is what's happening, this is what's happening. And the press are standing right next to it. Like, you'd think they'd turn around and point their camera at it just for a second. Like, It's not hard, but like silly little things like that they don't report on. But like, they don't show the full scale. For instance, when I first started it was just a porter cabin and a tent. That was the facilities in Dover. Now you have a new multi-million-pound facility. They have the Manston facility. You have down at Dungeness, the RNLI station being used as an operation. You have Lyd for overflow. And you also have the likes of Napier Barracks and various other facilities such as Frontier House in Folkestone that get used regularly. All of these are just to process them. That's not to put them in houses and hotels. That's just for them to come in, get processed. So by the summer, we're going to be looking at like over 1,000 a day coming over. And this is what people need to understand. And whilst everyone's sort of sitting back and just thinking, oh, this is going to get dealt with under a Conservative government, it's not. Because the figures are far higher than they've ever been, even under a Labour government. But people will still sit there and go, oh, it'd be worse under Labour. It may very well be worse under Labour, but ultimately things are worse than they've ever been under a Conservative government.
Totally agree. Absolutely agree with you. There's just no way that this Conservative government has an interest in dealing with this issue at all. In fact, I remember, Steve, again, from going through, looking at the stuff you've put out, like on the days when they were talking about we're going to deport the 130 and then maybe it might only be 30 and then it was 7. On those days, you were reporting that the vessels were arriving with bloody hundreds. I mean, I'm surprised they don't charter ferries and bring them in by the thousand. I mean, the numbers...
It'd be cheaper.
It'd be cheaper, yeah. And just as bad for us, because the numbers yeah, and look, American friends, I know you've got a huge issue on your southern border with, with Mexico. I totally get that, and that's why you need to build that wall back twice as high and stop anyone coming across. But we do have a piece of water. We have the English Channel, and there's just no desire to enforce that and use that. So it is shocking. I actually saw, Steve, I wanted to bring up, I saw there's a great comment I saw on your Telegram. Jake, can we just bring up this here? You put up this, and I thought it was brilliant. It's a brilliant exchange. We have this loathsome QC, Jessica Seymour. How glad I am I'm not on Twitter, by the way, so I don't see crap like this. And here she is saying, in response to Matt Goodwin, he seemed to make a couple of good points. He was saying, the Macron effect is now crystal clear. Lowest turnout in the Fifth Republic, largest seats for the populist right, record results for the left, blah, 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 blah. And what does she say? She says, oh, this is, of course, ignores the popularity of populism. Oh, she's so smart, such a good QC. Plenty of people in France saying France no longer looks like France. They say it openly, and there's no attempt to hide what it means, and this open racism and Islamophobia. So she said that, but then, as you rightly, if we just scroll down, well, you had something to say about that, didn't you? In terms of, well,
yeah, it's that France no longer looks. It's like France no longer looks like France. Is a true statement. The same can be said and should be said for Britain. People like this clown try to shoot down this discussion because they know that it's impossible to argue against. And it's true. You can't argue against it. All you've got to do is look out your window to see what's going on. If you look on your street and you'll realise that they're not all British and they've been coming over. And whilst, yes, some people support immigration, some people don't, and that's a completely different discussion. The argument to the side is you can't ignore the fact that too many are coming over now. Like, it's absolutely out of control. And they say populism as if it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's just what the people want. And if that's the narrative of what the country wants, you're the bad person for going against that, because the majority should rule, not the minority.
Oh, that's right. No, I mean, we're absolutely, we are ruled by minority rule at the moment, Steve. It's not and we have been now for a while. But so what fascinates me, so all these hundreds of people arrive, and I mean, obviously, so none of the vessels are ever stopped. Is that right? That nobody tries to turn
the only time they're ever turned back by the French is if the dinghy literally starts sinking a couple of miles off the French coast and they can't make it to the middle of the channel. But other than that, the French shadow them, follow them the whole way. And then they're picked up by the there's like even a call hotline, so they can call them in. Sorry, there's a call, and they can phone through and say, we're just by the middle of the channel. Can you come and pick us up? And then they're classed that as a rescue, and then off they go. The RNLI go out, or the Border Force, or whoever's been called for it by the Coast Guard, pick them up, bring the dinghies in, bring the illegals in, take them to Dover, unload them, put them on a coach, take them to either Manston or to various other facilities. And then from there, they go to a hotel, and then from the hotels, they're put into social housing. I put in a freedom of information request not long ago, right? And on that freedom of information request, like you word it properly, I went, how many asylum seekers that have had approved claims and refugees have been put into social housing since January the 1st, 2022? So it's only a small amount of time scale. And they wrote back saying, we have the information, but we're not going to release it because it's not within the public's interest. Yeah, which obviously tells me that the figure is very high, because they're only saying that there's 30,000 illegal immigrants in hotels. But since 2018, we've had 50,000 illegal immigrants just by boat. That's not including the lorry overstays, the lorries, the vehicles, the planes, and every other overstay. So if you put that figure at a rough estimate, we're say at least 100,000. So that's 70,000 people that have been put into private renting or social housing, all before the British people.
Well, yeah, that's the point. That's exactly the point. The point is, we have people that need to get into those houses. British people,
millions of them.
yeah, we have, and we're actually putting we're putting the needs of these illegals before the needs of our own legal citizens. That is very, very hard to take, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of enraging, because ultimately Brits are being put behind the illegals in the queue. And let's be honest, I mean, I call them illegal migrants. Are they illegal migrants in your view? What are they, these people?
They're illegal immigrants. Migrants move on, immigrants settle. And obviously these people, once they get to the UK, have no intention of moving on. So that in my eyes, they're illegal immigrants. Every other media outlet pre-2017 used to call them illegal immigrants as well. And then once it got to 2017, 2018, the whole narrative switched and there was refugees and migrants, and the whole argument changed. But no matter whatever you want to call them, they're illegal and they're criminals, and they've entered the country and they've broken our laws by coming in. The law still exists that they are illegal immigrants, but nobody seems to enforce it.
Yeah, because for the but then they try to frame them as, oh no, that's wrong, no, that's racism. these poor people, these are asylum seekers seeking asylum from where? France?
They do claim asylum. Here's the thing: they do claim asylum, but after they entered the country illegally. That's the thing. They've broken our laws, and for instance, the UK is not against people being helped in. For instance, if you look at the Ukrainian refugee situation, the UK government opened their arms and welcomed as many as they could. Not many wanted to come, because in reality, the majority wanted to go to like Poland, Moldova, Hungary, because they're like-minded and they're the same sort of people. But the media won't tell you that. They tell you that they all want to come to the UK, but that's not the truth. The only people that want to come to the UK are the people that can exploit us.
Yeah. I'm just reading Summertime Sue here. It says she watches the channels in Dover. I find it worrying for my grandchildren, but people won't listen and still vote for the traditional parties. What can you do if they don't think it's a problem? Well, I don't know, Sue. Well, what do you think, Steve?
I've got a clue, mate. I've been trying to wake people up for years, and I'll show them it. For instance, when they first announced the Rwanda deal, here's a prime example of how stupid some people are, including all of these mainstream political commentators. When they first announced the Rwanda deal, everyone was claiming it was working because there was a 2-week break from crossings. But the reason there was a 2-week break from crossing was because it was really rough and there was northeasterly winds, which ultimately meant if you go out in a dinghy, you're either going to drown or end up in Norway. But they was claiming that as some sort of win until I put out the footage of the lifeboat bringing in about 100 illegals straight after the weather had calmed down. And then all of a sudden they're going, oh, we didn't actually mean it was working. We're just saying it could have worked, and blah, and they're all backtracking. And I'm thinking,
that's right, Steve. Yeah, because I followed what you were putting out. I saw all that you were saying, because the media were saying, they were trying to spin this as if, oh yeah, Rwanda, just the very announcement that stopped them in their tracks. But it's
the arrogance that they even think that would work like that. By that is sheer Tory arrogance, that they think that them just saying you will go to Rwanda, they think that that's going to stop illegal immigration. It's one of the biggest problems in the UK, just by saying you'll go to Rwanda. The traffickers, etc., have no fear of Rwanda. Neither do the illegal immigrants. Not one that I've spoken to. Whenever I ask them about Rwanda, they laugh and they say, "We're not going to Rwanda." Do you know what I mean?
I do, but it's kind of heartbreaking because it shows like see from my perspective, I think the government announced the Rwanda. We're going to export everyone to Rwanda. Back at the time when Boris was in the deep stuff about, back in February or whenever they did, it was always about save Boris, let's deflect into different things. And that was like throwing red meat to the base. Oh yeah, Priti Patel, she's the Iron Lady. She's going to get tough with him. And then, as you say, Steve, it's a nonsense from start to finish. And apart from the likes of the Daily Mail, maybe, and the Daily Telegraph, most people see it as farcical and not addressing the issues at all. But then they've got to this situation where the seven individuals were not allowed to leave the UK. And now I read today that is there talk of might Priti go for another flight next month? Is that did you see that?
Well, yeah, in the comments he refused to rule it out. Tom Persglove, or however you say his name, he refused to rule it out. And it's like ridiculous. Like some of the things that I find hilarious that the media reported, some of the media were reporting that when the illegal migrants got onto the flight, the last 7, they were all welcomed with hugs and welcome arms and blah, blah, blah. And then other media outlets were reporting that they was beaten and they was harassed and they was abused. And I'm like, well, it was one or the other. You can't have both. What did they do? Beat up 3 of them and then cuddle 4 of them. It's the whole situation's laughable.
Yeah, and that flight, I understood it cost $500,000 to hire the jet or
Yeah,
whatever.
Yeah, that's 500,000. We didn't get that money back. There was no deal for return of payment. That was it. Taxpayers' money gone straight away. And I know that's only small scale compared to everything else that we pay out for in terms of illegal immigration, but it's still 500,000 that could have went on feeding the poor, etc.
Yeah, it could go on helping British veterans in need, and there's all kinds of worthy British things. I see Jason O'Brien here says Rwanda is a fine country now. Many countries have nasty past. Well, you're right, Jason, but here's the issue, and I'll put it to you as well, Steve. The deal that the government done is doubly bad. So they're going to try and get, you know, these people back to sent to Rwanda, but they're also going to accept people from Rwanda. People, I think, well, I can't remember the terminology amused me of some of the most vulnerable people from Rwanda to the UK. What could go wrong with that, Steve Laws, eh?
Well, here's the thing. That's what a lot of people, well, when the government announced these sort of deals, no one reads the small print of all the agreements. They just see the headlines and run with it. But the reality is, when they say Rwanda is most vulnerable, they mean people in wheelchairs, they mean people with disabilities, they mean people that are going to be a burden on the NHS, etc. They're going to need immediate housing, they're going to need this, they're going to need that. So ultimately, you're sending fighting age men to Rwanda, even though they're not going to go, I'm just doing it hypothetically. They're sending young men over there, and then in return, we're taking vulnerable people that are going to be a burden to the state that shouldn't even be here in the first place. And then that's what we're swapping it for. So how many we're going to take, they never actually gave an exact figure. So it could have been anything from 100 to 100,000.
Yeah, there was no limitation. And the other thing is, like we all know, Rwanda went through the genocide in the 1990s. And a lot of people coming out of that, Steve, who would be probably, you may have been born during it or shortly thereafter. I mean, to live in the aftermath of a genocide can cause all kinds of mental issues, you know, mental stresses and problems. So again, some of the most vulnerable could be essentially people, young people traumatized by genocide. And do we really want them coming into the UK? I mean, I can't believe
it's insane, isn't it?
It's mad. It's insane at every level. At every level, it's insane. And yet, that was the Conservatives' big plan. Because as far as I know, Steve, tell me, I mean, there's no other plan to deal with this, is there? Apart from this theoretical Rwanda back and forth.
No, there's nothing else in the pipeline. But we all know the only way to stop this is to push them back at sea, or to have British boats in French soil stopping the dinghies from leaving, because the French have no intention. They wave them off. There is only the two ways of stopping it. Everything else is complete nonsense. Saying you're going to send them, you think we've been trying to do this since 2003, doing the whole let's transfer them to different nations. At first it was Tanzania, and then they tried doing Albania and various other nations they've came up with. But ultimately it's never taken off. It's never worked. And the only way to stop it is pushing them back at sea. You have to be cruel to be kind, unfortunately. And it works with Australia. It works with Hungary and Poland. I know they've got a land border, but they push them back. They don't let them in. It's legally sound to do so. But the reason it hasn't taken off in the UK is because the civil service is corrupt to the core. It's been infiltrated by far left anarchists. And now they took it to the legal system and blocked the government from being able to do it. But if the government won't do that, they will never stop it.
Yeah, no, you're dead right. And I can see people agreeing with your point, Steve, concerning the civil service. I also, our friend Angela, good to see Angela on the stream here at Cloud Busting, saying, Angela Kavanagh saying, also, the World Health Organization doesn't care if these people have open tuberculosis. Have they all been double jabbed, Steve? Have they had their boosters?
Here's the thing, a lot of the nations, when it was a big deal, the whole COVID thing, I don't really care about it, if I'm honest with you. But when it was a big deal with like the whole COVID situation, a lot of them were coming from nations that only had like a 20% jab rate, etc. So whilst they're demanding that everyone in the UK gets jabbed and if you go and have your jab, you can't go here, you can't do that, you can't do this. At the same time, they're bringing people over from nations that haven't even got the facilities to give people jabs. And it's like, this is insane. If the pandemic was as real as they were claiming, why would they let them in?
Well, exactly. I cannot go to France because I have not been jabbed. And to be able to travel to France legally, you have to be jabbed. But the irony is that these people coming from the third world can happily make their way through France into the UK. I mean, this is very, very bizarre what's happening, on our borders. But here's the other thing, Steve. Like, again, talking about the communities. So these people come in, they're being escorted in by the hundreds. It's not going to stop. It's going to keep going. And these people are then, I guess, as you say, going off to hotels and then into what, social housing. Is that where they ultimately end? Is that their final destination here in the UK?
Yeah, the final destination is a mixture between social housing and being put into private rented, but the private renting is obviously paid for by housing benefits, etc. So ultimately, it might as well be social housing, to basically. And from there, obviously, a lot of them do cash in hand work in car washes, kebab shops, delivery drivers, you name it, they do it. And that's the end goal. That's what happens. And then they can bring here's another thing that people have to understand. One man coming off a dinghy can lead to 10 to 15 people because of the family reunification of the scheme. So whilst we say 28,500 came last year, it's more like 150,000 came over because of the family reunification scheme.
And that's why the comment you made earlier that we put up on screen, I mean, France may not be France anymore, but England is rapidly not becoming England anymore, because these numbers, even in a country the size of England, which is a lot bigger than where I live here in Northern Ireland, but it's not bigger. But you've got a finite housing, finite sort of space, and yet these, as you say, when you add in the family members they can bring across, I mean, essentially England's being changed anyway beyond recognition. Hi, John Mercer, by the way, thanks for being here. What's your thoughts on that? I mean, the changing face of England.
Oh yeah, the demographic changes that are happening in England just in my lifetime are unfathomable. It's like it's never been seen before in the world. It's like, I know America has a huge problem, etc., but they've always had sort of an immigration sort of policies because of the way the country was formed, etc. But in England, it's always been the English, other than the Welsh, the Scottish, and the Northern Irish, etc., and the Irish. It's always been English people. And then over the last 20, 30 years, it's just dramatically, they just opened the floodgates to everyone. I know there was immigration before, but it was never on a scale like it is today. And it's ridiculous. And whilst everyone's saying, oh, the NHS is overburdened, blah, 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 no one ever puts two and two, apart from common sense people, no one ever puts two and two together and goes, the reason I can't get a doctor isn't because there's not enough doctors, because there's too many people. Like, it's as simple as that. That's the reality of the situation. And it's the same with housing. It's the same with schools. It's the same with work. It's the same with university places. It's even the same with food shop. Like, when the food shortages come, we've still got to compete with people taking the food that shouldn't even be here in the first place. So everything has a spiral effect. Everything has a domino effect. So it's just going to go out of control. So it's really sad to see. It really is.
And as you said, the only ways of really stopping this are the two that you outlined. Number one, everything stopped, all the boats are stopped and turned around at sea, or alternatively, boots on the ground in northern France to stop it. And honestly, I don't see any chance of either of those two things happening anytime, well, actually at all. Do you?
Not under a Conservative government or a Labour government. It needs someone with a bit of a backbone to say, if the French turn around and they say, no, you can't have our boots on the ground, we'll go, okay, then what we do is we're pushing back at sea. And you don't have to push their dinghies back. Like the life rafts you get when you go on a ferry, and then, like, for instance, it's going to sink and they get the big with the roof over. You exchange the people from the dinghies to the life raft and you push it back into French waters, and you radio through to the French and say, they're coming back. And then if they say, no, they're not, and they push them back, you do a bit of a back and forth like a tennis game, but eventually the immigrants will get fed up with sitting in the middle of a channel and they will paddle back to France. That's what will happen if they know there's no chance of coming over. It will take a few months for it to take effect, and you can push out the message worldwide. You can do all the propaganda to put it out and say, look, you're not coming. But ultimately, until that happens, it will never stop.
Yeah, because that would exactly. Well, that's really interesting, because I can imagine that would have an impact on them. Whereas they see the Rwanda stuff, and as you point out, Steve, they just laugh at it. It's laughable. It's not to be taken seriously. But if you were shuttling about in the English Channel in one of those little sort of hooded vessels, you would pay attention to that. Especially, I mean, we're now entering these are the summer months, Steve. June, July, August, when the weather is, I guess, pretty calm in that English Channel. So, I mean, it just must be like an armada crossing of these small little dinghies. The people smugglers must be getting so much money from this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I recently put out a video about the traffickers on TikTok. For instance, they're advertising. It's so easy for them. They're putting pictures of the hotels. They're putting pictures of the RNLI going out and collecting them. Like, they're literally doing the job for the traffickers. All they have to do is get a dinghy, not get caught, head into the beaches in northern France, put the people on it. Their job's done. They're going to get collected in the middle of the channel, and the rest of it, the government will do the rest of the job for them. But as you go back to the weather changing, people haven't seen anything this year yet, and we're already on 11,500. It's already double the figures almost of what it was this time last year. Once July, August, September, October comes, that's when we're going to start seeing huge numbers, and people are going to be outraged. They think it's busy at the moment. They haven't seen anything yet. It's going to be huge numbers this year. And the weirdest thing, Gettr Calais, they're allowed, because obviously, I don't know if you've heard, they're trying to ban me from the docks again.
I've seen that. No, so
yeah, they're trying to say, like, it's the same thing they were trying to say last time. I'm intimidating the illegal immigrants and I'm harassing them by filming them coming off a ramp. But but the likes of Gettr Calais, they're allowed to wave them off in France, and now they're allowed to greet them at the port in the unrestricted access. It's absolutely insane. And they're the same charity that's been funding the legal challenges to block the flights to Rwanda. And it's like, why are you even letting them there?
And where do they get the money from, this charity, I wonder?
Well, they're misleading their supporters, because I've spoken to a lot of people that donate to Gettr Calais, and what they're donating for, what they think they're donating for, is vulnerable people in France. And we all know it's all a big smoke and mirrors and lies. But these people believe that there's a vulnerable, because there are some of them that are being mistreated in France. Like, it does happen. But so what they're thinking is going on is they're donating money to Gettr Calais so it can be buying clothes and food and tents, etc. in France. But in reality, that money's being used and siphoned off to fight legal battles in the UK. So they're misleading the people that they're donating to. They're basically committing crime against the charitable commission, but nobody will look into it, even though they're being investigated. It's absolutely laughable.
And I see a couple of points here. So I just sort of comments I want to just read off here, Steve. I see over in the Gettr, someone saying they make no attempt to assimilate into the melting pot and be a benefit. Someone else, Smokey Bear, says an immigrant with an average IQ of between 70 and 80 cannot assimilate into a 100 IQ average society. Yeah, it's probably true.
It's all true. It's all true. They've got no intentions of assimilating. If anything, they want to take over.
Yeah, but that's the most worrying thing, because when you talk about numbers coming over, say this year in 2022, and you might get to 70,000 or whatever, like that's 70,000 people who are pretty much dedicated to non-integration. That's serious.
Yeah, and then here's the thing as well, and then they get themselves into positions of power. If you look at the places like Tower Hamlets, etc.
Yeah.
Like, if you look who's running the councils and stuff there, they know exactly what they're doing. They're getting their people in. What they do is, whilst we're all divided and we don't know which party to follow between all the other parties that we've got, they just get behind one person who's their person because it's their race or whatever. They don't care if their politics agree or not. They'll just get behind that person and vote them in. Whereas we just argue till the sun comes up about who we should have. And that's why ultimately they're going to keep getting into power.
But you see, if you talk about the main political parties, there really isn't an argument. The Tories, Labour and Lib Dems, the three major political parties.
We can all agree they're awful.
Yeah, they're awful and they're destructive, and none of them have any intention of dealing with this everyday problem that affects so many British people. This tsunami of illegality, as I call it. They don't. But they're the three parties. So after the next general election, I mean, let's be honest, Dave. Whilst we may wish for other parties to get in, reality is it'll be either a Tory government, a Labour government, or some kind of combination thereof, or Lib Dems. It's going to be something like that. So I just cannot see how this one ends up resolving itself. And then there's the other thing that happens, because what happens when you get the odd dinghy must sink. There must be drownings in all of this, surely. Or does
Well, there's been about, since I've started covering it, since like 2018, 2019, something like that. It's been so long, I can't remember exactly when I started. But there's been about 30 to 40 deaths in the channel. About 30 of them were the French side, but they blame us, obviously. And about 10 were our side. But ultimately, it's down to the fault of the people taking off, because they're leaving in the weather too rough to cross the channel. Because ultimately, in nice weather, you've got no problems. You will get across. People could swim it in nice weather. But when it's rough, it is rough in the channel, and that's what people don't understand. So if they've come from like an African nation, etc., who don't really know much about sea life, when they jump into a dinghy, they're putting themselves at risk. Obviously, of course they are. It's one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. If you go into the route of the ferries, there's a good chance if you don't know how to steer a dinghy, you might hit a ferry. I've been out in one of the dinghies, obviously, when I went through that salvage rights thing a few years ago. And going near the ferries in that dinghy is quite scary. So like, you can imagine what it'd be like at pitch black when it's rough. Like, there is a risk to people's lives. It's not that great, because the risk isn't humongous, because ultimately they're shadowed by the French. That's why they shadow them. But it still does happen.
Well, on the dinghies and the big ships in the channel, there was a thing we talked about this in one of my streams. I think it was last week. Oh, hello to Gemma O'Doherty, my friend from Ireland. Good to see you, Gemma, on the stream. We talked about a thing, Steve, last week or so. It was a photograph in the media, and it was showing one of these little dinghies full of these illegals. And you had this little vessel, and then you had this giant, the giant bow of one of these huge ships just nearby. And the bit that struck us all, and was that the dinghy was pointing the wrong way. The dinghy seemed to be going towards France rather than towards the UK. I have no idea what the explanation of that was, but it did confirm the point you're making, that these vessels are huge. I think the English Channel is one of the busiest sea lanes in the world. I think I'm right in saying that, isn't it? In terms of the number of vessels flying through it. I mean, it's very dangerous waters from that point of view.
Yeah, that's the thing that I'm saying. Like, if they get themselves caught up in a ferry route, unless you know the routes that these ships take, you're putting yourself at risk. That's why they obviously send some of the traffickers in the dinghies, so they can get them across, because they know the routes. That's why, and that's ultimately the same argument that the RNLI use when they go out. Even though it's misleading and manipulative that they're doing it, they still use that same argument, just because a few have died, that they're going to pick up every single one. The government are so terrified of the NGOs and the far left activists that they will bend over backwards to please them. That's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I see Gemma O'Doherty's pointing out we had a referendum and all of this. So White Hart Lane says, how did we get a referendum on immigration? Well, we had one. It was called Brexit, and that should have dealt with it. 2019, it was all about bringing back control. Remember, that was a lie, Steve, wasn't it? Because
of course it was. That was just a lie to lean into the populist vote. That's all it was. That was all they done. The reality is, people have to understand, if you look back on what Boris Johnson's actual record of what he said about illegal immigration is insane. Like, he wants amnesty for everyone. And he's ultimately already given over 1 million amnesty when the COVID jabs were offered. That's what people seem to forget. He said that any illegal immigrants that want the COVID jab can come forward, register with a GP, and no questions will be asked. So that's over 1 million people that have already probably done that. I don't know how many would have come through, because they won't ever give us that figure. But that's an amnesty behind the back door, sort of, without calling it an amnesty.
Because so they can get their job.
Yeah, but once they're registered with a GP, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah, I see that. I understand your point. Yeah. Let me ask, how much do these people pay to get across?
It varies. I've spoken to quite a few, and they've all paid for anything from 2,000 to 5,000 to 6,000 euros. It all depends. They have different sort of. It sounds silly, but they have different sort of packages. And so ultimately, if you want a decent dinghy that's going to get you across quick and it's a lot stabler, you're paying top end of £5,000 to £6,000, and you won't be packed in with a dinghy full of like 60 people. But if you're paying bottom rates of about 2,000, you get put in one of the crap wooden boarded bottom ones that they've made in the apartments, and there'll be 60 odd on the dinghy, and they'll flood you all through together. So they're very different packages, and it all depends on the traffickers, etc. But it can vary, basically. There's no fixed rate for it.
So, okay, where do these very poor, vulnerable people, where are they getting up to 6,000 euros from? Where
But there's a few theories that people have. For instance, you could throw out the idea that a lot of family members, they're chipping in the money because they know it's an investment for the entire family to come over due to the reunification schemes, etc.
Yeah,
you got the NGOs, and there are a lot of them in France that raise a lot of money. They could be paying the traffickers, because a lot of them they work together. They might as well be traffickers, the NGOs, because they're pointing them in the right directions of these people.
Yeah,
and they're doing that. And then there's obviously the other option, that they go to France and they steal money, that they steal things to create the money. They get into the illegal trade, or they owe money and then they come over to the UK and have to work in cannabis farms, county lines, whatever, you name it. They have to work the money off once they get to the UK. There's various ways that they pay to come over. There's no set in stone way, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I see Leslie Olds is saying she's got a plan that would end this really quickly, but I don't think she can say what it is. Well, I think, Leslie, we've got all a fair idea of how we could end this really quickly. But the point is, there's no real political will. The media are playing along with the government, the establishment, in terms of, fundamentally not wanting to talk about it. And so it comes back to then those communities that do these migrants all stay in southern England, or do they move up, up to the Lutons and further north into the Midlands and whatnot?
It's all over the country. It used to be keep them down London and southeast, and then the north, sort of Yorkshire area and places like that. But now it's everywhere. They're in Wales, they're in Scotland, they're in Northern Ireland, they're all the way down in Cornwall. They're everywhere, literally everywhere. If you look at, for instance, Linton on Ouse, for an example, a little sleepy village in the middle of nowhere, 800 residents, one shop, one pub. That's all they've got. They're going to put 1,500 young fighting age men there. And it's like they've got a big campaign going trying to stop it. It's not going to stop, because the way to tell when things are moving forward is not look at what the news are saying, look at the job advertisements being put out for the areas, and look at the facts that they're asking for 300 staff members. And then you think, well, it's definitely happening. Yeah. Because they're not hiring these people for no reason.
No, honestly, I mean, I know we talked this before, and it is stunning, Steve, to sort of take the time to discuss this, because I mean, I see people saying it's a Kalergi plan and it's Soros and all that, which to be fair, probably is. The problem is that in the meantime, England and eventually the rest of the UK, Scotland, Wales, and even Northern Ireland are all being similarly transformed in ways that we didn't vote for. None of us voted for this.
It's the thing. No one was asked about it at all, not in the slightest, ever. No one's ever been asked. No one's ever voted for this. No one's ever even had even been polled on this matter, because the minute they do, it'll be an overwhelming no, we do not want this. And that's what scares them. Like, that's why we need somebody. All we need is one person to get into Parliament, just one person with our views that will stand up and say, no, we're not having it, we're not having it. And then that will repower, because when you speak in Parliament, normal people can hear it from all over the country. And then that's when change will come. That's what we need to do. That should be the first goal for everyone, is getting somebody into Parliament. Doesn't matter who, just get them in.
I mean, I'm seeing comments here, Steve, I see Jason saying Birmingham begs councils to send people to them, even though Birmingham has no housing. Leslie Butler saying there's some up Teesside way. Summertime Sue says they've got them in Oldham.
This is my point. They're everywhere.
It makes your point. It makes your point superbly. They are everywhere. And the problem is, Steve, that what we see at the moment is, is going to just get more, the problem gets greater. It doesn't.
This is just the beginning. This is the thing. It seems really bad at the moment, but this is just the beginning. We're in the early stages of this influx. It's got years to go before, and we're going to get hundreds of thousands into the millions before anything's done, in my opinion, because there's no political will to do so.
Yeah, but if we get into the millions, it's game over then, isn't it? For us, it's too late then.
It's not far until it is game over. This is what people have to understand. It's really not far. Like, you think of the numbers that are coming over, you think of the scale, you look at the problems that are happening. If you look just using the illegal immigration side of things, just around the hotels, etc., that was happening. If you look at the crime rates of what goes on, the rapes, the murders, the assaults, the burglaries, the car thefts, the fires, everything, you name it, those crimes are happening, and they're not happening by British people. Obviously, you do get some British people that are committing those crimes, but the overwhelming majority, without them being reported on, are illegal immigrants because they don't know how to live in our country.
I mean, some great comments coming in, Steve. I can see huge levels of agreement with what you're saying, and it appears that I see several people have mentioned Teesside. Actually, who knew Teesside seems to be popular with Wakandans or Rwandans or whatever they are. And actually, Malibite says it's happening worldwide. We should probably wrap it up in this the last few moments. Like what we've talked about will destroy the UK. Let's just be blunt about this one. It will erase our culture, our traditions, and our way of life. It just will. And the same's happening in mainland Europe, I think, at the moment.
It's worse in mainland Europe as well. Here's what people should take into account. Sorry to interrupt. Here's what people should take into account. If you need to look at places like Spain, France, Italy, Austria, Germany, because they're about 2 years ahead of us. So in terms of what's going on in terms of immigration. So if you see what's happening there, it's coming here. The fires in the barracks and the hotels that we've had here, they was happening in Europe a couple of years before, and now it's happening here. People need to realise that what happens in Europe, we're a few years behind.
And of course, it's happening in the States as well. I mean, because this is the point that American friends often say to me, Steve. We complain about 70,000, 100,000. They're getting millions crossing that southern border every year. Again, there's no desire. I mean, at the moment in the States with the Biden regime, there's no desire to want to do anything about that. In fact, they'd like more of them to come. So it's like the West has got a collective death wish. And we, in the case of the UK, we see it because it comes across by dinghy. In the case of the US, it walks across the border. It just walks in. I Want to Break Free says, Clacton on Sea is lovely, but I don't think many work there. Can't say I've been to Clacton on Sea yet, one of the places I haven't been to. But I mean, so it is a global problem, this. Let's just be honest, isn't it? And at this point in time, I'm not sure what the global solution is, or if there is one.
Well, the solution is everyone pushes back, but you need strong governments to do so. One thing to take into note, though, for the American side of things, they've got it really bad, but it goes down to if we had the same landscape size that they had, I think we would have it just as bad.
It's relative, yeah.
Because obviously, I don't know the exact figures, but we have the massive Muslim problem, whereas they have the massive Mexican problem, but they're both the same. It's both an eradication and bringing in cultures that do not fit with the way of life. So ultimately, the problem is just growing.
Although interestingly, Summertime Sue says, and I did see this last week, Joe Biden is talking about, what can I say? He wants to send some of the southern, the people coming from Mexico, someone from Southern America, he wants to send them over to Spain, which means they're going to come to us, aren't they? It's
insane. It's the Spanish government saying they need it because they need workers. I don't know how they're short because they're getting everyone coming from Morocco. So I don't really see the logic from that, unless they're saying that Mexicans are better than Muslims. I don't know. But we're gonna have them. We already get people flown in from places like Honduras, etc. So it's insane, David. Honestly, I sometimes I've run out of words to think about it because it's completely mind numbing that they even allow it to happen.
Well, the whole thing, it is a shocker, But I can tell you, there's been a lot of engagement on this one tonight, Steve, and pretty much I think everyone is making points that kind of agree with what you've been saying. And so, I would simply say, Jason says Spain has massive unemployment. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, after COVID, I'm not sure what the situation is in terms of employment numbers, but yeah, it's just one of these big issues that the mainstream media won't talk about. Mainstream politicians are duplicitous, Steve. They don't want to do it. So all I would say is, I want to thank you for, as I said at the start of the show as well, for the stuff that you're putting out. I just want to allow people to be able to. So where can people find you, Steve, so they can see more of your reporting and all the stuff that you put out?
Best place to follow me would be Telegram. I do have a Facebook account, but I get a bit lazy and forget to post on there. So probably best to just follow my Telegram channel or my YouTube channel. They're both under Steve Laws. So I'm a bit rubbish with usernames. I just put my name, if I'm honest with you. So, no, yeah, they're the only platform. I used to be on Twitter and everything, but they've got rid of me at the moment. So.
Oh, yeah. Listen, you're not, if you haven't been removed from Twitter, you're nobody, Steve. Only the best people have been removed from Twitter. So
yeah, I agree.
Badge of honor, mate. Badge of honor. Listen, thank you very much for being here. Steve, thanks for taking the time and giving us an hour of your time. Thanks everybody on all the different streams for all the different comments. Appreciate that there. I hope you enjoyed this chant. It does show we do face universal problems. But it also shows there are people, strong people around in different countries, and we do see the problems, and I think we know what we need to do. Maybe, Steve, one thing that would be a blessing would be if Trump somehow got back in again in 24 and he did something about the migration in the States. Maybe by that point the UK would find a better person or somebody with the backbone that you say we need to do the robust things that are going to have to be done. Simple as that.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Folks. Okay,
thanks
folks.
for having me on, Matt. Appreciate it.
All, Steve. Thank you very much again. Thanks, everybody, and catch you again Wednesday night. That's it for tonight. Good night.